Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to do a painting of this parrot, and this is a collab with 3 of my YouTube friends. The person that came up with the idea was Shana Jackson from Caution Artist at Play. She's a Holbein representative, and they sent her all of the brand new granulating Holbein watercolors. And so she made up little palettes for each of us, Angela from Clark Fine Art and Karen of Karen Clark Creations and myself, so that we'd have a little sampling of everything. And then we decided it'd be really fun to do a collaboration. So we each picked a set. I picked the bird set. The other ladies have each chosen one of the other 3 sets to use. And we decided to do a painting mainly based on that set. Now, the other ladies are much better at following directions and they stuck just to their sets, but you know me, I gotta do some mixed media. So I started off by sketching in this parrot with some watercolor pencils. It might not be a parrot. I'm not sure. It didn't say what bird it was on Unsplash where I found the commercial use reference photo. So if you know what kind of bird it is, let me know in the comments below. So basically I sketched it in with my watercolor pencils right on this watercolor paper. This is round hot press paper from Shenzhen, but let me tell you, the handmade paper from India is rougher than your typical Western paper. So I knew I'd get some good granulation here, even though it's called a hot press. It's actually a fairly rough paper. And you can see how beautifully the colors are granulating there. I'm using the colors from the bird set for this first layer, and I'm trying to really work wet into wet. Now you can see I wet, when I was wetting the paper, I wet the back and the front so that the paper would stick to my mat and not curl up on me, and that way I could paint all the way to the edge. Because a cool thing with these round watercolor papers is that you can mount them on like a colored mat board and then do a mat and frame it as normal, so you can see that deckled edge, and that's what I like to do. So yeah, the 6 colors, the top 4 and then the next 2 right below them in that palette are the bird set. So I'm sticking to those for the most part. I just want to get at least a good look at how those colors go, but because the color's a bit limited in those granulating sets, and also, to be honest, I don't think using the granulating colors on their own are the best use of them. I feel like you get the most bang for your buck when you mix the granulating colors in with your standard watercolors, so I am pulling from some of my other Holbein colors. So let me tell you about my Holbein journey. I first tried Holbein paints. This was probably back in 2016. I purchased a set of 18 colors on Amazon, and at that time, Holbein paints were cheap. They were so cheap to buy in sets. I wish I bought more back then, but I bought that set of 18 and I tried them. And actually, I like them, but I actually prefer paints that have a little bit more personality between colors, and their colors are very similar, except for the granulatings. The paints have a very similar personality to them. And I thought that was pretty cool. I kept them all in that little palette you see above. And then that's what I had for Holbein paints. And I didn't seek out any others. I think I might have bought like an extra tube I found on clearance. It was pretty cool. I think I bought a couple maybe open stock. But they're all in that set. And then I went to a workshop with Shana at Artisan Craftsman Supply, and she had some Holbein paints to try, and there were some colors I didn't have. So those big pans in the center, those are from that workshop. She's very good at sharing her toys, that Shana, I gotta say. I'll have links to everybody's YouTube channels in the video description, so you can check them out and see what they did with their granulating sets. So yeah, I'm just working wet into wet, and as I kind of see I want to kind of get a little detail or a little definition, I'll go back in with the watercolor pencils and draw right into the wet paper to get some edges back, because you know, it's pretty blurry because I'm working wet into wet. I will say, if you wet the back of the paper and you stick it to the mat, it does limit how much your paint flows, so you can kind of keep things where they are. And I do like to approach a watercolor with a unifying wash where I put color everywhere, because otherwise I feel like my painting looks too cut and pasted if I just wet the background and do the background and then do the foreground. So that's something I like to do personally. But I'm like, why waste this wet paper and those watercolor pencils? I'm lazy. I'm going to get that detail in now. So that's what I did there. So then after I went to that workshop with Shana and got those extra colors, then I was gifted a set of Holbein. And this was really nice. My friend Michelle, who actually took my watercolor retreat in France, she had gone to Japan. And she's like, do you want me to pick you up anything while I'm here? And I'm just like, oh no, I can't send you on an errand on vacation. No, I'm not going to do that. And plus I have so many air supplies that I would feel kind of, bad making her go do an errand for me. Well, she picked up this gorgeous set that was like one of their artist collaboration sets, and she filled her palette and she sent me the tubes with like enough for a half pan or a quarter pan in them. She's like, I know you'll do something with this cool tubes. The tubes have beautiful artwork on them. And she's a full-time RVer, so she doesn't have the extra space. She's like, so like, use the paint and then maybe you can do something cool with the tubes. So that's that little palette there down the bottom right of the thing that's got like 24 colors in it. And she sent me that little palette too. And I'm not sure if she got that one in Japan or not, but she sent me all sorts of really cool stationery things from Japan. I'll link to that video because it was so cool. And I saved all the paper. She wrapped everything up and I've been using them for collages because I'm a hoarder basically. But so those came from Michelle. And then Shana had made those little tiny palettes there. She made 3 palettes of those. One that has the fluorescent colors by Holbein. That's another new release. And then 2 of the little palettes that had all 4 of the granulating colors. So I am like spoiled. I am rich of Holbein paints right now. So I thought it'd be really fun to kind of pull those other Holbein colors in while I'm using the granulating colors, because I really think that's the way to make the granulating colors shine. Even though this is a collaboration about the granulating colors, I think it's really important to know how they work with the other stuff we have in our stash. And it doesn't have to be Holbein colors. You could try a granulating set from any brand, or maybe you want to try the Holbein granulating sets and mix it with other colors. You don't have to just stick to one brand. But I thought it'd be kind of nice to stick to one brand, especially since she is a brand ambassador for Holbein, and she did share her paints with me. So wanted to respect that and also kind of keep with that whole Holbein theme. And it's funny, doing this subject here, I found myself reaching for colors that I typically wouldn't use. And maybe it's because I typically don't paint tropical subjects. I've probably got the Caribbean on my mind because I just got back from a cruise. So I'm using the Juan Brilliant color, which is a color I hardly ever use. I'm using a gray. I never use mixed grays, especially opaque grays like that. But I found they really worked with this because we have such a different sort of contrast of the textured paints. By the way, I let this air dry for a couple hours before I came in to heat dry it, just so I could go in and add some detailed layers. But this cotton handmade paper takes an age to dry. If I let that dry on its own, I'd have to leave it overnight. I had a heater going in my studio, and it was like I did a sewing project while I was waiting for that to dry, had lunch, then came back. It's like, all right, I need to heat set this so I can put some details on top and not ruin my pens or not get fuzzy edges. So my first instinct was just, okay, maybe I won't do too much to it. Maybe just do a little pen to bring out some details and call it a day. But I don't know. I wasn't that, like, I thought, and it looks fine here on camera, but I was thinking in real life, putting that white gel pen on there looked really discordant. And I'm like, oh, now I need to do something to tie it in. And so I thought, I know, I'll bring some gouache in. Now I do have some Holbein gouache. I have the set of 5 primaries, so it's a true primary set. I'm telling you, if you want to learn color theory, the Holbein makes a set of 5 colors. It's cyan, magenta, and yellow gouache plus white and black, and that is such a wonderful set to begin with because it teaches you with true primaries, and there's a mixing guide in that set. And it used to be cheap. Oh, you used to be able to find that on Amazon so cheap. I think it's probably now around $45 on Amazon, and I still think it's worth it because they're 15 ml tubes. So if you're confused about color, that's a really great thing to start with because it doesn't overwhelm you. So I did use some of those colors, but I have other gouache in this set. This set is my studio dry gouache set, and what I did, and I have a whole video on setting this up. I'll try to remember to link that down below as well. But I chose colors that were light fast pigments, and I put them in the ceramic palette from Meeden, and I have a coupon code for Meeden if you want that palette. I'll link that down below. Oh, I hope I remember to link all these things. If not, drop a comment. I'll get you the coupon code. But I don't want to say it verbally because I think I might mess it up. My brain does not work the way it used to. So yeah, I'm going in with some gouache. Like I said, this is my studio palette. The reason I keep these particular colors in this palette is because I know if I use these in a mixed media way over a painting that's like not in a sketchbook, like this paper, I would plan to mount this and frame it. I want it to be something that's going to not fade if I put it on the wall, basically. And And so that's why I'm using the squash. But I also like it because these colors do reactivate really well. But my trick is, because sometimes your gouache is going to crack. Usually gouache will kind of crack and fall out of your if you dry it down in a palette. But I learned a tip, and I think I learned this from artist Lena Reno. It was to use, or maybe Sarah Burns, I'm not sure, but it was to use Winsor Newton's blending medium, watercolor blending medium in your mix it up in the gouache when you put it in your pan to dry it down. And that keeps it so it re-wets really easily and it doesn't crack and fall out. So that's why my gouache palette looks like this. Even if there's a little bit of cracking, it's not enough to make it fall out. But this is a heavy palette. It's not flipping over. It's staying on my desk. I actually have it on a little shelf and I slide it out. I put little felt bumpers on the bottom so I could slide it in and out of my shelf. But that's been such a great investment for gouache because I don't waste any and it reactivates really well. So I'll try to remember to link the Winsor Newton blending medium because that was really a game changer there. And the Holbein gouache does tend to crack in your palette, so especially if you're going to use it in a travel palette, I would recommend that. But I can mix some really nice darks here. Your artist gouache, the ones that use the more light, fast pigments, tend to be a little bit more saturated, I find, but you have the trade-off of them not being quite as opaque in a lot of colors. So just something to keep in mind. If you're working on white paper or you're working over watercolor, it's certainly opaque enough. But if you're working on black paper, you may struggle to get the opacity that you want. So that's the main difference between designer gouache and artist gouache. The designer gouache is meant for reproduction, opacity, velvet finish, but not necessarily light fastness. So it's going to give you what it needs to give you those qualities. Whereas artist gouache may lack on, it might not be completely matte all the time. It may not be completely opaque all the time, but you're getting light, fast colors. So, it's a compromise. You got to know what you're after with the gouache. And that's what, because I tend to use these more for paintings that aren't in a sketchbook, I like having it in my studio palette. So yeah, I find this really great for layering up and refining areas that got a little too fuzzy with that wet into wet wash, which, just because of the nature of a wet into wet wash, it's not going to be super crisp. You're going to have, the paint will stay where you want it if you wet the back, but it's still going to give you fuzzy edges. So this is me bringing back the fuzzy edges. Now, I spend a lot of time refining with the gouache and with other things you'll see. This is watercolor here, just sap green watercolor I'm adding in. I do spend probably more time applying these products, but I put more. If you're going to see how much product did I use from each category on this, the majority of the product I'm using is the granulating watercolor in that first wash. That's where most of the stuff on my paper is happening. But I needed to go in and refine to get the look that I wanted. And not to say that you had to get that look. You could have just refined the face and called it a day. But I think as you progress as an artist, as you define your style, as you do what you like, you're going to like a certain look, and it's not better, it's not worse. I'm not saying that realism is better than abstraction. I'm not saying photorealism is better than representational painting, because I don't do photorealism. I'm not saying that anything is better or worse. I'm just saying, to get what you like, which in turn becomes your style, you're going to employ different techniques, different products. I decided as I was doing this, I kind of wanted the bird to be kind of in a perch over the sea or a lake or something. So I ended up putting in a horizon line and adding a little more definition to the water. And I did that with a mixture of the granulating blue from the bird set as well as some of your standard Holbein blues. And here I'm using a reservoir quill, which I'm not sold on these brushes, honestly. I bought this from Jerry's Autorama. It's the Mimic version because I didn't want to get a real fur version, but to be honest, I don't see much of an advantage of this over your typical liner brush. But I'm trying to, I've been using this thing for a couple of years and I'm still not loving it, to be honest. So that's why you haven't seen me use it too much and you haven't seen me recommend it, because I'm like, I'm not sure. It might be one of those brushes where you really need the natural hair for it to be beneficial. I don't know. I'm not going down that path, but so I may not even review it at all. I don't know. Although I did design a smaller version of a reservoir quill with Altenew. So when that comes out, if and when that comes out, I will let you know, because it meets my needs a little bit better. It might meet yours. Maybe that would meet your needs. I don't know. We're all different, but But yeah, I'm just that one. I'm thinking liner works just as well. So apologize for the hand in the way. I'm using my fine liners. These are the Ohuhu liquid fine liners. I like these. I mean, you can use whatever fine liners you want. I don't think as far as what you get on the paper, there's a heck of a lot of difference, but I like that those have liquid filled barrels so I can see how much ink I have left. And I think it has a lot more ink in it because it's not being like absorbed into a cotton pad. It's like all good product. So I do feel like you get a little more for your money with those. I also think a brown inking on this would have looked good too. So, but you know, then again, I was also feeling like it wasn't crisp enough. Like the line work needed to match the vibrancy of the color that I had. And I thought brown would just kind of fade in. So I felt like I needed those black lines. I'll tell you another tip. If you're using a cotton paper that's really absorbent, like this handmade watercolor paper, which is more absorbent than other cotton watercolor papers. And I'll link, I think that you can get this at Blick or Amazon. The Shizan paper. I don't know if it's Shizan or Shazan. Shazam makes you say, wow. If you could see me now, I'm painting with the paint. I'm not following the rules. I'm doing what I should ain't. Yeah, all the other ladies are like, yeah, we just stuck to the paints we were supposed to use, Lindsay. I'm like, yeah, sorry. Does not follow directions. But yeah, I use a finer line when you're using the handmade watercolor papers because it's going to spread a bit. It's really going to suck in that ink. So just FYI. So I use thinner pens than I usually use, which is great because I usually don't use those really thin pens on watercolor paper. So they got some use. So I just kind of like salted to taste, basically. If I felt like I needed a little more definition, I added a little more definition. If I felt like I needed a little more body to my color, I went in with some Prismacolor pencil. The reason I used, actually Holbein would have worked good for this. I don't have a very big Holbein collection. I have a set of 36 and they're not in my, right in my stand next to me, which I keep my Prismacolors and also some cheaper color pencils, and I just use them for refining watercolors mostly. If I was going to do a 100% colored pencil piece, I would use, honestly, I'd probably use the Derwent Lightfast or the Caran d'Ache Luminance because I don't have that many Holbeins. Holbeins are very similar to Prismacolors, except they are harder. So when I'm doing the mixed media pieces, I tend to prefer Prismacolor because they're so soft and they lay down and grab really well, especially on a softer paper, like a handmade paper. And, yeah, just kind of tweaking. But it's funny how you spend more time on those final refinements than you do on that initial wash, even though that initial wash or that initial layer is the majority of the product you're putting down. It's kind of like when you're doing your makeup, you know, you can slap on the moisturizer, slap on the foundation, but then when you're going to do your little winged eyeliner, you're taking some time with that, or you're looking like Rocky Horror Picture Show. So yeah, you got to take your time on the details. And even though it's just those tiny little bits of color you're putting down, you know, take time with it. It's fun. Might as well, right? Might as well take your time with it. And it's funny that like 80% of the stuff you put down, you could do that in your initial wash, and then you spend 80% of the time putting 20% of the product. It's the 80-20 rule. It just applies to everything. But there you have it. There is a finished piece. I'm happy with how it came out, even though it was looking a little sketchy at the beginning. And I want you to check out the other videos in this collab. I'm going to link those videos down below. Say hi to my friends and see what artwork you can do when you stick to the rules. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.